Wait, let's unpack this. We are living through a profound paradox that I think really defines modern life.
It really does.
We are more connected than any humans in history. I mean, every notification, every email, every single text message is like this little wire tethering us to the external world.
Constantly.
And yet, at the same time, this pervasive, deep-seated feeling of isolation is just rising globally. It feels like the ultimate contradiction.
It is. Infinite connectivity, always available, but we're starved for genuine intimacy.
The real connection.
Yeah, that tension is exactly what we need to explore. It's the gap, between being physically accessible and feeling emotionally whole.
Right.
We've built a world that makes us masters at managing our external visibility, the perfect social profile, the witty response, but we are far less adept at managing our internal state when all that noise finally stops.
And that's why this deep dive is so crucial. So much of that internal turmoil, it seems to stem from confusing two fundamentally different things.
Two states of being, yeah. Being alone and feeling lonely.
That contradiction is the mission here. We are going to cut through that confusion today. We're going to define the crucial distinction between solitude and loneliness.
Which is massive.
A massive distinction. And we'll explore the profound, and I mean measurable, consequences of blurring those lines.
And when you say measurable, you mean biological, physical consequences that are, frankly, genuinely alarming.
Exactly. And then finally, we'll get into the practical side, actionable strategies, both psychological techniques you can start using today and some really innovative tech design concepts.
All to help you transform that chosen alone time into a deep, resilient source of strength, creativity, and, self-knowledge.
Think of this whole journey as getting fluent in, let's call it, the high school of being alone.
I like that. It's about building the internal architecture to be comfortable and even productive in your own company.
It requires recognizing that feeling lonely isn't just an inconvenience. It's not a temporary sadness.
No, it's a profound biological and sociological signal. And understanding why these feelings arise, whether it's ancient evolutionary wiring, modern social norms, or just the way our digital tools are designed, that's the first step.
The indispensable first step toward reclaiming total agency over your emotional life.
Exactly.
If we can master this, we gain a foundational strength. So let's start where all clarity begins, with the terms themselves.
With the definitions.
Because if we start confusing these concepts, we instantly pathologize what is a perfectly healthy and even necessary human activity.
The difference isn't subtle, it's absolute. And the entire distinction really hinges on two core things.
Okay, what are they?
Volition, did you choose it?
Yeah.
And what's the resulting subjective emotional experience you have?
Right. Okay, so let's tackle the negative state first, because that's the one we spend so much energy trying to avoid.
The loneliness.
Right. You define this as a profoundly negative, painful, and very subjective emotional experience. It's the feeling of a discrepancy, a painful one.
It's a gap. It's the gap between the relationships you desire, the quantity and the quality of them, and the relationships you actually have. And the key word for loneliness is that it is fundamentally involuntary.
You didn't choose it.
You did not choose this feeling. It was imposed on you by circumstances or a perceived lack. And it's characterized by this deep, aching feeling of lacking an emotional connection or intimacy.
A feeling that your true self isn't being seen or understood.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this is the most counterintuitive part of chronic loneliness, right? You can feel this acute lack of connection even when you are physically surrounded by other people.
Absolutely.
Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of meaningful connection. You can be intensely lonely in a massive crowd surrounded by millions of strangers.
Or even more painfully, I think, desperately lonely within a marriage or a family.
Oh, that's perhaps the most painful kind. A long-term partnership where that emotional reciprocity has just completely broken down. And because loneliness is an internal, subjective state, it often remains completely invisible.
Invisible to the outside world, yeah. Until the person suffering chooses to talk about it, which is, of course, incredibly hard because of the stigma.
It's much stigma.
Okay, so now let's contrast that with its psychological opposite, solitude. This is fundamentally different. It's an objective, neutral state. It's just the physical absence of other people.
Right. And the magic ingredient here is voluntariness.
A choice.
That choice is everything. When solitude is chosen consciously, intentionally, it completely transforms its purpose and its emotional impact. It stops being a vacuum and it becomes a resource.
Okay.
It functions as a space for mental recovery, for self-reflection, stress reduction, cultivating inner peace. The whole intention shifts from being left behind to deliberately withdrawing.
I read a wonderful quote that defined chosen alone time as seeking quiet before others and before the inner monologue.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And that suggests there's a difference between just the physical absence
Yeah.
and achieving true mental silence.
That distinction is profound. Physical solitude, just being alone, is the prerequisite. But true solitude is that mental state where the external demands and the internal chatter, that endless self-critical voice in your head, they both just subside.
You're deliberately seeking that inner space and stillness.
Exactly.
So if I deliberately schedule 2 hours to work on a project in a closed room, that's solitude. If I'm physically alone because I was left out of the office dinner and I feel worthless, that's loneliness.
Perfect distinction. It's the intent and the resulting emotional texture that define the experience.
Right. But, as we said in the intro, our modern society makes it really hard to uphold this distinction.
So hard. Despite the proven positive potential of chosen solitude, the clarity, the creativity, the stress relief being alone is still widely seen as a social failure.
A defect in your character. Or worse, proof that you just couldn't get anyone to hang out with you.
Right. And this cultural judgment is so insidious. If you're sitting alone in a restaurant, people's first assumption is you've been stood up, not that you're prioritizing self-reflection.
That societal pressure creates so much unnecessary anxiety. The expectation of constant connectivity, the whole narrative that social proximity is what a successful life looks like.
It unnecessarily strengthens and legitimizes the fear of being alone.
And the roots of this discomfort, they aren't just psychological, are they? They're hardwired into our biology.
Absolutely. We are, at our core, evolutionarily social creatures. I mean, look back at human history.
It was about survival.
Group affiliation was absolutely necessary for the physical survival of our ancestors. Being cast out of the tribe meant certain death.
And our brains still reflect that ancient reality.
They do. Hormones like oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and the brain's entire reward system are designed to reinforce our need for society, to make social connection feel good.
So that deep biological programming explains why being alone can initially feel unnatural, uncomfortable, or even threatening. It's triggering an ancient survival alarm.
That's it exactly. The initial discomfort we feel when we're isolated is our body's evolutionary alarm bell ringing, saying, danger, you're outside the protective circle. Yeah. But when that alarm bell moves from a normal temporary worry to a morbid, life-altering obsession, we cross a boundary
Into clinical pathology.
into autophobia.
Autophobia, the morbid or pathological fear of being alone. What are the clinical markers? What distinguishes this intense anxiety from just, general discomfort?
Autophobia is a specific anxiety disorder. It's characterized by extreme anxiety, a feeling of absolute helplessness, or even outright panic when the person is alone or even just thinks about being alone.
And it's often compounded by this fear that something bad will happen and no one will be there to help.
Exactly. And the physical symptoms are terrifying. They're textbook panic attack sequences.
Like what?
Well, you're looking at a manifestation of the sympathetic nervous system going into total overdrive. Severe heart palpitations, intense, uncontrollable sweating, physical nausea, shaking, acute shortness of breath,
A terrifying feeling of faintness or loss of control.
culminating in full-blown panic attacks. Yes.
So what's the line then between a normal, transient worry about being alone and the pathological degree that starts dictating your life choices?
The defining feature is functional limitation. It's totally normal to occasionally dislike being alone or worry about isolation. That's fine.
Right.
The situation only reaches a pathological degree when the fear dominates a person's entire life. It starts dictating major decisions like choosing a job or a partner or even where you live.
It stops being a feeling you manage, and it becomes the overarching rule that governs and restricts your entire existence.
That's it. The individual sacrifices their own needs, their authenticity, just to maintain constant company.
So understanding this distinction, voluntary restorative solitude versus involuntary painful loneliness, that's the foundational step.
It is.
But we know chronic loneliness is rampant, so why are so many people struggling with this? That leads us straight into the roots and the, frankly, terrifying, measurable consequences of chronic isolation.
We have to explore the psychological and societal drivers that take this natural state of being alone and just transform it into debilitating chronic loneliness, a state that's rapidly being recognized as a massive critical health crisis.
Globally, yeah. And the foundation for how we process and manage being alone is laid down incredibly early in life. Our capacity for self-soothing, for self-reliance, it's all shaped by our earliest childhood attachment experiences.
The quality of those early life experiences really sets the cornerstone for lifelong emotional independence. We see several factors that significantly increase the risk for developing these deep-seated fears of being alone later in life.
And they're often rooted in a deficit of trust or security.
Always. Can you elaborate on what some of those specific risk factors are?
Certainly, one major factor is chronic neglect or frequent traumatic separation from your primary caregivers during those crucial developmental periods.
It basically teaches the child that the world is unreliable and that their presence isn't always valued. Conversely, a lack of emotional availability from parents, so the parent is physically there, but they're emotionally absent or unresponsive, that prevents the child from developing a robust sense of internal validation.
It's the difference between always needing reassurance from someone else and being able to generate it from within.
Exactly. And there's a surprising risk factor on the other end of the spectrum, too. Radical overprotection.
Oh, so?
When a parent shields a child from all failure, all discomfort, or any solitude, they effectively prevent the child from developing self-reliance and the capacity to regulate their own emotional state.
You never learn to handle it yourself.
You never learn. And of course, traumatic losses during childhood, the death or abandonment by a key figure, those are also typical triggers that can prime a person for later fears of abandonment and crippling loneliness.
So if a person never developed that inner navigational system because their caregivers were always navigating for them, they find themselves totally adrift as an adult. They have no self-soothing mechanism when they face being alone.
They just lack the internal tools to cope. And this innate risk developed in early life is then just radically amplified by our modern societal conditions.
What we call the contemporary accelerant of isolation.
Yes.
And the clearest one has to be the societal pressure cooker. The demand to be constantly on.
That pressure is immense. It shows up as an expectation to be perpetually available, constantly connected, and almost always documented as being with other people. And social media acts like a cruel magnifying glass on this.
It really does. The curated highlight reels of seemingly perfect happiness and constant social activity.
They reinforce this pervasive toxic message that a successful, worthwhile life means you should never, ever be alone.
That's the core of insta-loneliness, isn't it? You compare your unedited, quiet Tuesday night to everyone else's manufactured digital ideal, and you immediately feel inadequate and excluded.
The comparison game is neurologically devastating. It triggers ancient comparison mechanisms that were designed for small, intimate tribal groups, and it scales them up to thousands of strangers displaying these optimized, filtered realities.
And then you have the effects of massive urbanization.
Right. People living in densely packed cities frequently report feeling more emotionally isolated, despite being physically close to millions of others. The fragmentation of community means high physical density doesn't translate to high social intimacy.
The classic paradox of the big city. Surrounded by people, but known by no one.
And we have to add the demands of the modern workplace. The constant drive for efficiency, the rapid pace, the blurring of boundaries between work and personal life, these are consistently cited as significant risk factors.
If your identity is only tied to your productivity and you have no time for genuine connection, isolation is pretty much inevitable.
It is. And all of this feeds into the subject we absolutely have to confront, the health epidemic of loneliness. The data on this isn't just sociological anymore, it's hard medical fact.
It demands medical recognition. Some groundbreaking research argues that chronic loneliness isn't just a symptom of depression or social issues.
It's a disease state in itself, an unrecognized pandemic, a major public health issue that requires intervention at the governmental level.
So let's move beyond the emotional toll and quantify the cost to the body. What is the most alarming comparison that the research provides?
The most frequently cited comparison is stark. Chronic, sustained loneliness is considered as damaging to a person's long-term physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes daily.
15 cigarettes a day, that's staggering.
To put that in context, it's reported to be equally harmful as excessive alcohol consumption and demonstrably more harmful than a lack of regular physical exercise.
15 cigarettes a day. That is the actual measurable biological cost of feeling perpetually disconnected. But how? How does a feeling translate into physical damage? What's the mechanism?
The mechanism is chronic stress. When the body interprets social isolation as a threat to survival, which, as we discussed, it was evolutionarily, it triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis.
And that floods the system with stress hormones like cortisol.
Exactly. In short-term stress, cortisol is helpful. But when loneliness is chronic, That sustained cortisol elevation becomes toxic. Your body is just constantly on high alert.
It's basically running a low-grade fight-or-flight response
Yeah.
24/7.
Yes. And this chronic hyperalertness leads to a measurable increase in systemic inflammation. Researchers look for biomarkers like C-reactive protein or CRP, and in chronically lonely individuals, these inflammation markers are elevated.
And that constant inflammation is what does the damage.
It contributes to hardening of the arteries, increased blood pressure, which accelerates cardiovascular diseases. It even impacts cognitive function, increasing the risk for stroke and dementia later in life. And studies have even shown that loneliness accelerates cellular aging. It visibly impacts telomere length, the protective caps on our chromosomes. Loneliness is literally aging your body prematurely.
That's compelling. It's not just a spiral into depression, it's a spiral into physical decay.
Hmm.
And speaking of spirals, let's detail that psychological negative feedback loop you call the downward spiral of loneliness.
Right. The downward spiral is this vicious cycle of cognitive distortion and social withdrawal. It's incredibly difficult for the person inside it to even recognize it, let alone break out of it.
And it starts with that initial feeling of loneliness leading to social withdrawal. It's a defense mechanism, right? To protect against future pain.
Yes, but the withdrawal doesn't help. It just warps the person's perception of external social cues. The lonely person starts using these specific cognitive distortions.
Like what?
They might engage in mind reading. She didn't invite me because she thinks I'm boring. Or arbitrary inference. My boss didn't say good morning, so he must hate me.
They interpret neutral or ambiguous actions as active rejection.
Exactly. This distorted perception, this negative self-perception, it reinforces the feelings of being helpless, unloved, or excluded, which then justifies even more withdrawal. The withdrawal reinforces the belief, even if the belief wasn't based in reality to begin with.
It's a vicious cycle.
And this continued retreat then actually starts to cause a real negative perception from their peers, because the individual is now constantly closed off or hostile or overly sensitive.
And that real negative reaction from others just confirms their initial fears.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of isolation, fueled by fear.
And this fear of isolation leads to these profound and often disastrous life choices, especially around intimacy. The relationship trap.
The relationship trap is a huge casualty of loneliness. The fear of being alone drives so many people to enter into or cling desperately to partnerships that are just fundamentally unhealthy.
Unfulfilling or even abusive.
Yes, just to avoid the terror of being single. The numbers are staggering. Some estimates suggest up to a third of relationships are maintained strictly because of the fear of loneliness.
A third. Think about that colossal burden of unhappiness carried around the world just to avoid being single.
The fallout is significant. Chronic dissatisfaction, emotional exhaustion, and just repeating unhealthy dynamics. It often leads to deep codependency where your identity becomes completely reliant on the other person.
You sacrifice your authenticity for proximity.
Exactly. And by desperately avoiding alone time, people lose the essential skill of self-determination. They lose their ability to even recognize, let alone articulate and advocate for, their own needs.
And that stifles personal development, cripples resilience, and ultimately limits their creativity and potential.
All because they are running away from an emotional state they haven't learned how to process.
We've painted an extremely clear and very sobering picture of the cost of confusing these two states. So if loneliness is the poison, then intentional solitude has to be the antidote. How do we reclaim that space?
That's the shift. The intentional use of alone time solitude has to be seen not as a passive absence, but as an active, deliberate cultivation of the self.
It's about recognizing the power that emerges when you're just present, without external demands, without needing to perform.
Precisely.
So what are the hidden benefits we unlock when we choose this intentional self-retreat? Not because we have to, but because we want to.
Well, the primary benefit, the cornerstone, is self-knowledge. When you eliminate the constant interference of external influences, expectations, competing voices, you finally create the quiet space you need to hear what we might call your inner voice clearly.
It's like removing the static so you can finally tune into your own frequency.
Yeah.
And why is that clarity so vital?
Because it's the foundation for making authentic, self-determined life choices. Without self-knowledge cultivated in solitude, your choices are just reactions to external pressure.
What your friends expect, what society values, what your partner demands.
Exactly. In solitude, you can define your own values and then align your actions with them.
What about creativity? We tend to worship collaboration in the modern workplace, but you're suggesting that innovation is actually born in isolation.
I am. Undisturbed, intentional time is a massive, untapped source for new ideas and innovation. Think about the psychological function here. Solitude allows the mind's default mode network to become active.
And that's the network responsible for mind wandering.
For unfocused thought, mind-wandering, self-referential processing, when you're quiet, your mind associates freely, without the pressure to produce a coherent, articulate thought right away, or to conform to a group consensus.
It's the difference between focused work and breakthrough insight. The insight often happens when you step away from the focused work.
Precisely. This mental freedom is the rich soil for creativity and unconventional connections. So many famous artists, writers, inventors from Darwin to Einstein said their most productive moments happened in isolation.
It's the incubation chamber where raw ideas can turn into breakthroughs. What about building internal strength?
That's the second great benefit. Solitude fosters deep resilience and independence. It promotes self-reliance and autonomous decision-making because you're forced to confront challenges and regulate your emotional response without immediate help.
And research backs this up.
Consistently, research shows that people who actively enjoy being alone tend to be significantly more resilient and independent, especially during times of crisis. They've developed robust internal strategies for managing challenges.
Rather than relying solely on external support systems that might fail or disappear.
Exactly. And then there's that beautiful paradox we touched on earlier.
That learning to be alone actually improves our ability to connect with others.
It absolutely does. Paradoxically, mastering and truly enjoying your own company is the necessary precursor to deeper, more authentic social connections.
How does that work?
When you seek company not from a position of neediness or deficit, but from a position of inner strength and wholeness, you're choosing contacts consciously. You can set healthy boundaries, you're less susceptible to those toxic, codependent dynamics.
Your presence becomes a choice, not a necessity. You're choosing a partnership because you want to share your life, not because you need someone else to fill a void in yours.
It shifts the entire relational dynamic from consumption to contribution. It is an act of power, not an act of desperation.
Okay, let's get practical. Where do we find this state? For a modern listener caught in the urban crush, is solitude only achievable on a remote mountaintop?
No, solitude is less about geography and more about internal filtering. Historically, sure, it was sought through deliberate withdrawal, religious practice, meditation, extended stays in nature.
The classic wandering in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But for us, today, fighting traffic and constant notifications.
We find it in intentional pockets of time that we have to fiercely protect. It can be found in simple activities. Going alone to a cafe, visiting a museum at your own pace, journaling, or just sitting silently without any digital distraction for 15 minutes.
Some people find it in movement, like long walks without headphones, or during highly focused activities like yoga or cooking.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that surprisingly, some even describe achieving solitude on a crowded street or a busy bus. How can that possibly be true?
Well, the physical context matters less than the intentional separation from external stimulus. If you are observing the crowd, but the crowd isn't demanding your attention and you're not required to interact, you can achieve a state of observational privacy. The key is being undisturbed.
I see.
When researchers looked at the essence of wilderness privacy among long-distance backpackers, they found it was defined by three things, all of which you can apply to a city.
And what were those three factors?
First, freedom from human-generated intrusions, so
Yeah.
noise, visual distractions, social demands. Second, complete control over one's time and actions, no schedule, no deadlines. And third, freedom from everyday pressures and attention loads.
That concept of freedom from attention loads is what technology constantly violates. It's that perpetual low-level cognitive tax you pay just waiting for the next notification. Solitude removes that tax.
That is the perfect segue. If technology is the primary driver of constant intrusion, can technology also be redesigned and leveraged to provide the solution?
Can we use our digital tools not for connection, but for deliberate, enforced, and positive disconnection?
This is where we shift from psychology to design philosophy. Traditionally, the mobile phone is the antithesis of silence. Now we're talking about using sophisticated digital tools to enforce and manage solitude.
It's a radical departure from the connectivity at all costs model. And this innovative thinking is driven by what's called life-based design, or LBD.
LBD.
It's a holistic design methodology. Critically, it focuses first on understanding human life, our deepest actions, values, goals, contexts, before designing the technical solution.
So it starts with the human desired state, not the technical capability. How does that contrast with, say, standard design approaches?
Standard user-centered design often focuses on optimizing efficiency for existing tasks. LBD starts with existential questions. It asks, what improves the quality of life? What opens up new possibilities for human flourishing?
It doesn't just solve a technical problem that aims to support a human goal.
Exactly. And in this framework, solitude is treated as a core human goal, a desirable form of life.
A mental state that people actively hope to achieve and sustain.
Right. Once you accept solitude as a goal, the design requirements flow naturally. It moves from this nebulous, impossible ideal to a quantifiable, achievable service. This thinking led to the conceptualization of the Bazaar of Solitude service cluster.
The Bazaar of Solitude, a conceptual model designed to support intentional solitude. Tell us about the three core functional goals technology has to meet for this service to be successful.
Okay, these three goals are basically the technical spec for designing a healthy disconnect. The first goal is straightforward, enabling solitude.
Using technology to create the circumstances for solitude, regardless of where you are. So, noise cancellation, blocking digital pathways.
Yes. The second goal introduces complexity, facilitating low disturbance contact. Solitude can't mean absolute dangerous isolation. The user has to be able to specify a minimal, controlled level of interaction.
So true emergencies or pre-approved contacts can break through the barrier. It's not a blackout, it's a highly customized filter.
Exactly. And what about the third goal? This addresses the biggest psychological penalty of disconnecting.
Right, the third goal is arguably the most vital for making this sustainable long-term. Guaranteeing safe return. The service has to ensure a complete update and a smooth re-entry into social and work life without an emotional or mental cost.
Meaning you don't spend the first 2 hours after your solitude just catching up on 1,000 emails and messages.
Which would completely negate the benefits of the time off. That makes perfect sense. The fear of re-entry, the fear of a massive, punitive workload waiting for you, that's what stops people from disconnecting in the first place.
The technology has to manage the backlog so you don't feel penalized. It has to mitigate the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and the reality of catch-up work.
Okay, so let's move from philosophy to functional engineering. What are the core technological requirements needed to support these goals?
The requirements address the three primary forms of noise that ruin solitude: external noise, internal mental noise, and cognitive instability.
Start with the most obvious one, external noise.
Okay. Reducing external disturbances and noise. This is a two-pronged approach. Physically, you use proven methods like high-end noise-canceling tech. Virtually, it means rigorous digital techniques, activating silent modes, diverting all non-critical calls and messages to answering services.
Creating a digital firewall against the telecom world?
Exactly.
That handles the things coming at you.
Yeah.
But the deeper, more constant problem is the psychological anxiety that we might miss something critical, that internal mental noise.
That leads to the second and most innovative requirement: reducing internal mental noise. This anxiety comes from the feeling you must be continuously alert, the expectation from your boss, an emergency from family. The proposed solution is a highly sophisticated intelligent agent.
A virtual personal assistant built into your device.
Right. And this agent doesn't just hold your messages, it actively manages the communication flow on your behalf. Depending on your parameters, it can summarize conversations, participate in low-level social networks to maintain continuity, and, crucially, it only alerts you for truly critical situations. The agent absorbs the cognitive burden of perpetual readiness.
The complexity here sounds immense. How does an agent learn what's truly urgent for a specific user? That's not a simple algorithm.
No, it requires advanced machine learning, constantly refining a user's priority hierarchy. For a CEO, an urgent alert might be a stock market drop. For a parent, a call from their child's school. It needs to know who in your contact list has the authority to break the solitude firewall.
If it fails, it either interrupts you needlessly or it misses a genuine emergency. Both would erode user trust instantly.
It's a fascinating challenge, outsourcing our vigilance.
Yep.
And the third functional requirement focuses on optimizing the actual state of mind during solitude.
Activating a balanced state of mind. Because solitude can quickly devolve into just rumination or anxiety if your mind is left totally unstructured.
Exactly. So the service leverages your personal profile, biofeedback, and context to provide fitted relaxation and cognitive nudges.
For example,
This could mean delivering specific nature sounds known to reduce heart rate, playing tailored music, or even pulling up refreshing positive memories images or videos of cherished places.
Hmm.
Anything that's been tagged as a positive mental setting in your profile.
So the technology is working gently in the background, drawing your mind away from worry and nudging it into a constructive, positive mode. It's personalized emotional regulation support.
It is. And to achieve this level of hyperpersonalization, we need the final and maybe the most technically complex element, the personification filter.
Let's spend some time on this because multi-dimensional matrix sounds like jargon. Let's use an analogy. If the intelligent agent is the digital bodyguard, what is the personification filter?
The filter is the central control panel. It's the brain that tailors the entire experience. Think of it less as a matrix and more as an exceptionally high-end, dedicated personal concierge service that knows your tastes, your rules, and your environment all at once.
Okay, so walk us through the 3 dimensions of customization for this high-end concierge service.
First, you have the user-defined choices. Personal solitude parameters. This is about subjective taste. If you use classical music to get into solitude, maybe you want Bach. Someone else might want ambient electronic music. The system has to let you modify background sounds, visual palettes, everything.
Right, so that's the input from the user, their preferences. What's the second dimension?
The second is user-specified machine-controlled interventions. This is the filtration layer, the digital firewall we program. Users define explicit rules for communication traffic.
Give us a concrete example of a rule a user might set.
Allow calls from my wife, but send all office emails to the intelligent agent for a delayed summary. Put non-urgent info on hold for 12 hours. Skip all marketing texts. It's a constant, active filtering process.
The user programs the automated gatekeeper. Now, the third dimension is where it gets truly adaptive, right? Integrating the physical world.
That is context modification. This dimension integrates real-time sensor data from your environment and biometrics to monitor location, activity, and even emotional state. GTS, calendar data, maybe future detectors of heart rate variability.
So the system detects my physical reality and modifies its response.
Exactly. If you're hiking in a forest, an activity strongly correlated with seeking solitude, the system can detect that and automatically adapt to the solitude mode. It might switch from focus music to nature sounds or elevate the priority of location-specific safety alerts.
All without you manually changing a setting.
And if you stop walking and your heart rate spikes, indicating anxiety, the system might trigger a breathwork reminder or switch to an even more calming audio environment. It becomes a personalized, responsive nervous system.
The goal of this entire framework is profound. It's designed to reduce our dependence on external validation by protecting self-determined activity, making solitude a managed high-value resource.
Instead of a risky vacuum.
This conceptual approach is revolutionary. It flips the script entirely. But while we wait for the perfect intelligent agent, we still need immediate personal tools.
We have to bridge that gap. We've established that solitude is a skill, not a gift, and it's one that requires conscious, deliberate practice. The primary initial barrier is that feeling of fear, the anxiety that comes up when the noise stops.
So the first psychological step isn't about fighting the fear itself.
Absolutely not. The key is to accept the fear or the discomfort as a signal. It's that old evolutionary alarm bell, and strengthen our inner resilience in spite of it. Remember, loneliness is primarily a subjective state of mind.
Perpetuated by those negative self-perceptions. I am helpless, I am unloved, I am excluded.
Right. The pathway out requires actively identifying and changing that inner attitude.
So how do we start integrating this conscious practice into a life that's already packed with obligations and digital noise?
You start small and you start consciously. Begin with just 5 to 10 minutes of conscious, non-distracted alone time daily. Consistency is the goal.
And then gradually increase it to 30 to 60 minutes.
Right. And the single most crucial tip here is planning. You have to schedule these dates with yourself and treat them as strictly as any other professional obligation.
Non-negotiable self-dates. That enforces respect for your own internal needs.
Precisely. And for building the mindset and for immediate anxiety relief, practices like mindfulness and basic meditation are indispensable.
The practice involves just sitting in silence and observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment.
You're essentially proving to your anxious self that your internal monologue isn't an existential threat. You're gradually dismantling the fear of your own company.
And for those moments of acute anxiety, where the panic really sets in and the physical symptoms escalate.
Then we turn to specific, targeted breathwork techniques. When fight or flight is triggered, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. To counteract this, use this sequence. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then exhale slowly for 6 seconds.
That extended exhale is key for calming the nervous system.
It is. The longer exhale signals to your parasympathetic system that you're safe. It helps calm the heart, regulate the nervous system. You can even pair this with a simple mantra like breathe in trust, breathe out, letting go.
It helps anchor your focus away from the anxiety and back to the present moment.
Exactly.
Those are powerful internal tools. Now let's list some specific, measurable activities our listener can implement right away to positively integrate solitude. Things that move them past just sitting in a room.
We're looking for activities that strengthen the connection to the self and require being intentionally comfortable alone in public spaces.
Like what?
Start by going alone to a cafe or even a full dinner at a restaurant. This builds self-confidence and directly challenges that societal pressure that says being alone in public is shameful.
It proves your self-worth is independent of having company.
Right. Next, try taking long walks without a phone. This is essential for enhancing mindfulness and allowing for cognitive freedom. It removes the possibility of immediate digital distraction.
I often recommend cultural experiences alone. Going to a museum is completely different when you're not navigating someone else's pace.
A perfect example of self-determined cultural enrichment. You can spend an hour looking at one piece or bypass entire wings all at your own tempo.
What else?
Other simple but effective activities include journal writing for self-reflection, cooking or baking solo as an act of creativity and self-care, or trying a new hobby that requires individual focus, like starting a language or practicing a craft.
The ultimate goal is that shift from dependence on external validation toward deep, sustainable self-determination. But we have to address the line where self-help isn't enough. When should a listener seek professional, therapeutic help?
That line is defined by functional impairment. It's essential to recognize the warning signs. You should absolutely consult a doctor or therapist if the anxiety starts manifesting as intense disruptive panic attacks or if you experience chronic insomnia due to worry.
And if the fear is actively shrinking their life,
If you find yourself completely unable to manage daily life without constant company, or if the fear leads to persistent depressive symptoms, hopelessness, or thoughts of self-harm, then professional support is urgently necessary. The good news is that these fears are highly treatable.
what are the common evidence-based therapeutic approaches for these fears?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is typically the first line of defense and is highly effective. It helps patients recognize those negative thought patterns we talked about, mind reading, arbitrary inference, and replace them with more realistic evaluations.
So CBT helps dismantle the intellectual foundation of that negative spiral.
Precisely. And then there is exposure therapy, or confrontation therapy, which directly tackles the behavioral avoidance.
This is where, under the safe guidance of a therapist, the person gradually practices confronting the fear of being alone.
Yes, it's an incremental approach, starting small, maybe 5 minutes alone in a safe room, gradually moving to an hour alone in public. It builds sustainable self-confidence and self-efficacy.
So we start small, build our skills, recognize and rewire our internal biases, and if necessary, use professional tools to dismantle the pathological fear. The journey is fundamentally about reducing our dependence on external circumstances.
And becoming our own reliable source of safety. And that focus on internal reliance while leveraging technology to manage the intrusion of the external world, that's the central finding of this entire deep dive.
Solitude, when chosen, is the ultimate resource for authentic, resilient, modern living. It's about developing that unshakable inner compass, choosing your relationships from a position of profound strength, and recognizing that the time you spend with yourself is not wasted.
It is the absolute foundation for a resilient, creative, and fully realized life.
We've spent time detailing how life-based design conceptualizes using technology to support this precious state. The intelligent agent, the personification filter. These are complex, sophisticated systems designed to insulate the self from the noise of perpetual readiness.
The ultimate technological safety net to ensure we're never punished for needing space.
But here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, one that really demands reflection. We've seen how technology can be designed to support solitude.
But given the massive cultural shift toward being perpetually accessible, the next great frontier for personal independence isn't about building new technological marvels at all.
What is it then?
It's about defining the moment when we must actively choose to switch off the hyper-efficient, sophisticated systems designed to keep us perpetually on standby. The true test of self-mastery might be learning to rely on our own internal, intelligent agent.
That inner voice we cultivate in silence.
Yeah.
rather than outsourcing that crucial decision to a digital one.
Exactly.
The systems are designed to keep us on, learning to choose the off switch and protecting that choice with fierce self-respect. That is agency. So we leave you with this question. How will you consciously schedule and fiercely protect your inner silence this week?
Find that time, make it a non-negotiable obligation, and discover the profound restorative power of being truly alone.